I'm here with Leelah Eisenberg, Noreen of the Healthy Peaceful podcast, just welcoming viewers and listeners today. So today I have with me Leelah Eisenberg, and I just want to let our viewers and listeners know a little bit about you, Leelah. And Leelah has 28 years experience as a healthcare professional. She has a master's in social gerontology. She is a 2011 graduate of the Ayurvedic Institute, and she has dedicated professionally the last 9 years to working with clients specifically through Ayurveda, the traditional healing system. She is a certified Ayurvedic practitioner. And let's see, while studying at the Institute, she studied cooking and nutrition with Amadea Morningstar, who has several cookbooks on Ayurvedic cuisine. She also became a certified Ayurvedic nutrition counselor, working with Amadea Morningstar. She's also studied feng shui, and she's a certified yoga instructor. And all of these multiple disciplines and the years that she has spent, I know, dedicated to the study of Ayurveda and other disciplines related, really have given her the opportunity to bring some wonderful things to her clients. And welcome, Liz. Welcome to the Healthy Peaceful podcast. So,
thank you, Noreen.
Yes, and just for our viewers and listeners, we'll just put it out there that Liz and I went to the Ayurvedic Institute together for a 9-month period in 2010, 2011. So that's where we met, and where I started my Ayurvedic journey. But I know that Liz, your journey started before that. And in today's our conversation today, I'd really like to find out about your Ayurvedic journey, how you came to want to study Ayurveda, and how it has evolved over the years. So maybe we can just start from the beginning. When did you first hear about Ayurveda, and what got you started on this journey?
What got me started was being 18 years old on a bicycle on a journey that was the day my life stood still. And I lost control of my bicycle in a small town in Wisconsin. And when I lost control, I was found unconscious on the road, bleeding, and they didn't know if I'd survive it. And I spent several months in the hospital, not being able to think, not being able to understand what people were talking about. And my doctors kept telling me how lucky I was. They were doing all these brain function tests, and they kept saying, "You're so lucky, you're so lucky." And I didn't feel lucky. Mm-hmm. I was scared out of my mind, lying flat in a bed. Mm-hmm. They didn't let me out. They didn't let me up. And I couldn't think straight. But all I could think is one day, if I ever make it to the other side, I want to help people, because I understand what it means to be in a little white room, not knowing if I was going to survive. Mm-hmm. And I was discharged from the hospital, and I went with my mother to an audiologist on the side of the hospital, who told me I was going to be partially deaf for the rest of my life. And he was joking about it. And here I was 2 years into college in my undergraduate work, being told I may not be able to go back to college because the technology wasn't there to aid me in hearing. Mm-hmm. And well, I was devastated. I was crying.
That's, I've heard many people I've heard many people who had not quite the same experience, but similar experiences with modern healthcare in terms of wanting to do something different or looking for an alternative. And I know you said that that particular very traumatic incident in your life really, it was a catalyst for you to want to help people. And I know you spent, before getting involved in Ayurveda, you spent many, many years working in the traditional medical system as an occupational therapist and also as a working in gerontology. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
I saw people of all ages and all diagnoses, and I kept feeling that there was something wrong, that once they entered into the system, they kept getting worse. They
Yeah,
usually didn't, they, the elderly in particular had multiple diagnoses.
sure.
And I think the proper expression for it, the Western expression, is slippery slope. That once they entered into a medical care environment, there were a lot of good things about it. They could be stabilized, but very often it was just the beginning of things getting worse. I'm not talking about somebody broke a finger. I'm talking
Right.
about they saw themselves as diseased,
Sure.
as less than perfect, as not hopeful. And when they, during that time, I kept thinking, there's got to be more. There's got to be more. And that came to a head when I realized how sick I was getting being in that system as a healthcare provider.
Right.
And it really got me when my brother died at a young age of the same thing my mother died from years before and my father died from. And I felt I was next. If I didn't find a way out of that conundrum, whatever we're going to call it, that chaos, which is, as the Chinese would say, often where great dreams begin, in the middle of the chaotic experience. Some people would say that that's the initiation of the wisdom or intelligence or kundalini, whatever you want to call it. I was scared out of my mind.
Sure, sure. Well, I think
And that's when I found.
I think many times we do as humans, very few of us will implement change, positive change, or look for alternatives unless there's some degree of suffering, unfortunately. So I believe what you're describing is not only did you see some of your family members really suffering from illness and premature death, but you were starting to see some things, health issues cropping up with yourself as well. And would it be safe to say that that was the start of your journey in terms of looking for alternatives, or there's got to be a better way?
Absolutely, because I knew that in my heart that I wasn't going to make it if I didn't find it. And so there was a big survival instinct in me to do my homework. And my homework came in the form of a Netflix movie on Ayurveda that showed up in my queue.
Oh my goodness. Do you recall the name of the movie?
Ayurveda.
It was just called Ayurveda. That's wonderful. So that was your first introduction to Ayurveda.
I saw the scenes from India, and I saw scenes from New York City from a doctor named Dr. Scott Gerson. who had an MD, PhD, Ayurvedic doctor, and I made up my mind that I was going to find him. I didn't know what city he was in, and I found him and I went to him.
Okay, wow, wow. So that was all based on a Netflix movie.
Yes, he must have thought I was nuts.
You were no,
But I showed up.
you were determined. Determined is the word.
I showed up shaky. It was only a 2-hour bus ride into New York City from Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
When I got there, I put myself at his feet and I just said, tell me what I need to do. Tell me what I need to do to stay alive. And he looked at me and he said, no matter what happened with your parents and your brother, it doesn't mean that it has to happen to you. And he checked my pulses and he said, you're not dying. I was very sick. I had severe anxiety, fibromyalgia, a lot of pain, a lot of mental brain fog. And he gave me hope. He gave me education. He gave me opportunity to have a Panchakarma experience. And that Panchakarma experience in his retreat center, PBS was there and they were filming. And I went in the middle of a snowstorm, a nor'easter.
Oh
and
my
I got
goodness.
there and my husband didn't want me to go. And I knew I had to go. And when I got there, it seemed so strange. It was so odd. They're eating something called kitchari, and it looked awful. They were doing yoga, and I had never done yoga successfully. Never. It was always, I didn't know how to do yoga. Over the years, every time I tried, it was a disaster.
Right, you didn't have a regular yoga
But
practice.
they were doing massage, they were doing chants. I was wondering, I'm a Jewish girl. What am I doing in here? This is so strange for me. And
Right.
what happened was at the end of 3 days of massage and shirodara, oil massage being placed on my third eye, and this weird food, and meditations and sound healing, and my pain went away in 3 days.
Wow.
And I
Wow, that's
had a
amazing.
mental clarity I hadn't had in years. And I looked at Dr. Gerson and I said, Dr. Gerson, I'm in. I'll do anything. I want to learn this work because it's in 3 days so powerfully changed me on every level. You know, in Ayurveda, there are many levels. There's the mind, there's the body, there's the breath, there's the bliss, there's the
Right,
God
right.
level,
There's
there's
various.
the subtle levels.
Absolutely. I actually want to just that's really great. I just want to touch on a couple of your key points, and I think it's important anytime that we enter a healing journey is that the sign of a healer is really to give you hope, and I think that's really important. And it sounds like he did that right from the beginning. So, and you also talked about he used a diagnostic tool, the pulse, and that is one tool that an Ayurvedic practitioner can use in order to assess the state of health. And you talked about Panchakarma. For some of our listeners and viewers may not know what that is, but it sounds like in your case it was it was residential. You went to his center, and generally it's an Ayurvedic detoxification using a number of different techniques that are important for the individual to heal. But it sounds like in a very short period of time, you were renewed and refreshed. So that's very encouraging. And kitchari is used very frequently in panchakarma and in detox. It's a combination of a dal, a split dal, and usually basmati rice, and it's very good for the digestion. And so, is there anything else about that particular panchakarma or meeting with Dr. Gerson that that you want to share with our listeners or viewers, Leelah?
Ayurveda and that experience is a journey. It's not a destination.
Mm-hmm.
When you begin the journey, what you're looking for is the magic bullet.
Mm-hmm.
Many people, myself included.
Sure.
There is the magic bullet is self-awareness and self-care. And finding through those things a balance in your world, literally your world. But it changes. It continually changes. And that was something I didn't understand then. It was like I wanted to grab onto this newfound healthy feeling because I hadn't had it for so long. And then I wanted to make it static. I didn't want it to go away. And I didn't know how to do the work because other than find another teacher. And I spent a few years studying nonstop, and I feel sorry also for my husband because everybody I found, all I could do was talk about what I was learning. And they had no idea what I was talking about because they hadn't experienced.
Right. They have to be, it's sort of like, you were so excited about it that they weren't ready to be converted yet, in other words.
I was mowing them down.
That generally doesn't work. So, I know you spent, so what year do you recall how many years you were actually, from your discovery of Ayurvedic, until the time you decided to go to the Ayurvedic Institute as a student in 2010? How many years, were you looking at Ayurveda just personally before that?
2.5 years where I studied on my own.
Sure.
But each year I would go to hear Dr. Ladd's seminar for a week.
Okay.
That was off campus, that was in New York City. Not in the city, but in the mountain area.
Right,
and the final Ananda ashram.
The ashram. Okay. Yeah.
And when I was there the final time, Dr. Ladd was lecturing, and I had a profound experience of awareness that showed me that I showed me a path that I had not considered, and that path was going to school at the Institute.
Okay.
I had not believed it was possible for me to just pick up and go, leave my husband with the dog in his career on his own, and just pick up and study this profound work. That was in a time when if you Googled Ayurveda, there might be 2 or 3 things that showed up on the internet.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's were there
Not 100,000.
yeah, I mean it's certainly grown exponentially since then, there's no doubt. Dr. Ladd's seminars at Ananda, was there a particular subject, or was he just talking, was he doing his spiritual healing, or was there a
Yes,
particular, he was doing
yes.
his week of
It was a
spiritual healing?
Friday. It was the final night. It was a Friday night, and I had asked the staff if I could light candles there, which is my sacred Sabbath practice, and my self-care, my lineage. And I was sitting, and Dr. Ladd was surrounded by people from all over the world, talking about Kundalini and blocked Kundalini energy. And as he was speaking, I started shaking and sweating. And everybody around me turned to me and said, "Are you okay? Are you all right?" And I wasn't all right. I was blocked. And I stepped out into the rain outside, and I knew at that moment if I had to find a way to go to the Institute. I didn't know how, but I knew it was very, very important for my, can we use the word dharma? And
Sure,
for your
sure.
listeners, you could explain the
Yeah, yeah.
dharmic
For
path.
your, it sounds like it was important both for your self-healing, which and also your dharma, your purpose, your responsibility in life, that this was something that you felt really compelled to do, and it was necessary. It's more than required. It's necessary. So, and I know
Yes.
you went to India a couple of times. You did Panchakarma, or tell me about that.
Yes. And learning. I went twice. The first time I went for a Panchakarma experience with the world expert,
Hmm.
Sundil Joshi,
Hmm.
and Dr. Joshi had just built a very large Panchakarma center, and he had worked with me over the year to get me ready for that experience. That was just before the year before I started Ayurvedic school.
Okay.
I was not completely well. I had other underlying conditions that were very problematic, but I went to India for 3 weeks, and India's an eye-opening experience, and it
Yes.
was wonderful to see his clinic, to see his dedication, to learn right from the horse's mouth
Hmm.
the important components and how he does his magical work. I think it's magic.
Sure. So
And
were you a
the
student with
second
Dr.
time
Were you a student at that time, or were you actually doing your own Panchakarma?
I was for 3 weeks doing my own panchakarma,
Okay.
but actually in Ayurveda, the best way to learn in the beginning is on you. Not
Of
just
course.
to teach something, but to experience something and to know it firsthand. And,
Of course.
I was a stubborn goat at that time. I wasn't ready for everything Dr. Joshi wanted me to do
Well,
at that
maybe a better
point.
way to put it was you were skeptical. You were skeptical.
Um, I didn't believe some of the simplicity of the things he suggested while I was
I
there to
see.
do
Okay.
was important. I'll give you an example.
Sure, yeah, I'd love an
Okay.
example. Yeah, that's great.
The example was he told me to rest while I was there. Okay? So, what does rest mean to a person who's used to going 24/7? What does
Yeah.
that mean? So I went into his library, which was in disarray, and I spent 5 hours cleaning and organizing it. Okay. And he thanked me, but it was a mistake. I was directed not to do that kind of work while I'm in that place. Another example of that was that on the last day I was there, he told me to rest before the flight, that it would be a hard flight. And it's very important to slowly go out of Panchakarma into real life.
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
It's very important for the conclusion of the detox. And so, what did I do? I went into town, okay, to buy gifts for everybody on the way that I would
Okay,
eat at home. And
sure.
I got stuck in the middle of the street for a half hour because the streetlights don't work. The motorcycles are passing, the cows are on and the donkeys are on the path.
Uh,
You're passing temples. Everybody was going so fast.
yeah, it's pretty
And
chaotic.
I didn't know I didn't think I'd make my plane. I just barely got back to the center in time to get to the airport to fly back to Baltimore. But you know what? I, I have to have compassion for myself, that I just didn't know any better. I
Yeah, yeah,
wasn't ready. I was committing, in Ayurveda, it's called crimes against wisdom.
of
My
course.
wisdom knew that that wasn't a good idea. My wisdom knew in my heart, it's all about the heart, that you have to take good advice. Okay, my wisdom knew Dr. Joshi was right, but here's me, the stubborn gal. You know, I felt buying gifts was more important.
Yeah, well,
Okay,
I think those are
and
great examples. They're great examples because, we can hear intellectually about crimes against wisdom, or, innately we know not to do something, but I don't like to call it stubborn in a way, but I like to call it, we all have a bit of an independent or rebellious streak. And, you doing your gift shopping, or thinking that relaxation was, spending 5 hours cleaning library books. It's hard to, it's hard, it's the compassion is important, the self-compassion. And I think when we have the ability to view ourselves compassionately, that really helps us to build the bridge of compassion, where we can, if we're ultimately working as a healer, which you are, you have the ability to be compassionate with your clients as well. So that's why
Dr. Rob,
I think those experiences that you described are very important, you know.
thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Lod talked about this in school. I don't know if you remember the lecture that
Probably
he
not.
talked
You can
about.
refresh my mind.
He talked about learning, and he talked about this at the ashram several times, that the most important thing for a professional practitioner is to enter the heart of the client,
Yes, I do
see
recall
it
that.
from
Yeah,
their perspective,
sure.
to be non-judgmental about where they are, and not push people to go in directions that they're not ready for.
Yes.
And I'd say that's one of the most profound lessons from the Institute that I had, because it takes working with many people to open your own heart to their experience of life. Their
Absolutely.
experience is unique. Their treatments are unique to them. Okay, that's why Ayurveda is so different than so many Western healing methodologies that don't take into account the differences in the physiology and the mindset of the patient at the time, and the factors, other factors that change the healing, like the weather. That was not something I believed when I went to the Institute. When
Yeah.
we were taught that where the sun is changes your digestive fire.
Oh,
And
sure.
what's the digestive fire anyway?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
what does it have to do with data? Everything
sure.
in terms of your health,
Yeah,
everything. And
absolutely.
so many people,
Yeah.
so
Well, let,
many people today have have problems with their health. That
a-
there are simple ways of developing their own self-compassion and their own self-care and their own self-awareness and acknowledgement, so that they could have hope again and they can have a different experience, which doesn't have to be pain. It doesn't have to be dysfunction. It doesn't have to be a life of growing older and sicker. It could be a life of growing, reverse the aging process. And many people, including myself, have been able to do that. And
ab
for that, for all of the education, I'm so thankful. But we're not to keep it to ourselves. We're
yeah, no,
instructed to share it.
that's really important. When you started at the institute, I'm going to shift now to the institute. Um, you attended the Ayurvedic Institute, their Ayurvedic Studies program in 2010 and 2011. And if you were to, I know there were many lessons learned there for anyone who was a student of Dr. Ladd's or attended the institute, the other teachers as well. But if you were only going to tell me five um, things, what were your, we'll go into your five top takeaways. What were the things that were most significant for you? And I'm sure there's many more than that. Five doesn't do it justice, but what really resonated with you or was most helpful to you in your own healing process or most helpful for you in working with clients? And maybe it wasn't the case when you were there, but you realize it, all these years later.
Oh, okay, Noreen, you're going to count it for me, because once I
I'll
start talking about this,
I'll let you know
I'll
when we're
lose
shifting,
track.
but you go ahead. You tell me what was most significant for you. What were your what was most meaningful for you in attending the institute, having that experience as a student?
Um, family lineage
Mm-hmm.
was a major piece, our
Mm-hmm.
DNA, and how
Mm-hmm.
it affects our own doshas, our
Mm-hmm.
own inner balance, and how we can heal with our lineage behind us, supporting us in healing,
Mm-hmm.
versus our just taking on the things from our family lineage and DNA that don't support us. There's a
Mm.
beautiful practice in Ayurveda called Tarpana, and
Mm-hmm.
Tarpana is a method of healing the DNA. There are different cultures that use practices like Tarpana, but it's very profound, and that was a big takeaway for
Mm-hmm.
me. to realize that my lineage stands behind me in my Ayurvedic journey. It doesn't contradict it, it supports it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's important.
that's one.
Mm-hmm.
Something else is learning how to let go of control. Controlling things gets in the way, but allowing for things supports a healing journey.
That's beautiful. I think I have found with many people with health conditions, control is a big factor. And would you say, in terms of allow, I like your choice of words, allowing. Um, is that the same or different than accepting?
It means letting go. It means that whatever happens, it's okay. It's okay. You'll find a way to the other side. That everything's a puzzle, but we're not in control of the puzzle pieces. Dr. Ladd would say that it's like watching a movie, and we're the witness consciousness. We're not, we're in the movie, but if we can have this allowance of watching it as a movie, then we don't get so emotional or angry or disruptive and get in the way of things resolving. We can use our emotions to fuel our healing journey, or we could use them to get in the way.
Yes,
So
that's really beautiful.
I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Ladd I think Dr. Ladd did emphasize that, you know, realizing that we are the, there's different levels, and that we are the witness, and thinking about what's happening around us as a movie is a way to create some space around what's happening, and
Exactly.
so that, and I think that can be very healing as well. So
Another point, Miss Noreen, is about the chaos. The
chaos.
world is in chaos. There's so much change, and there's so much fear about this change.
Are you referring
And
to
Dr.
now?
Ladd,
Oh, okay. In general, yes.
yeah, and Dr. Ladd, in his infinite wisdom, talked about that as a catalyst for personal and professional growth. That change is, if we can welcome the changes in us, changes in others, changes in the world, and think about it from the perspective that the outcomes, and pray for the outcomes being positive outcomes, because God knows the world needs change now. It's just differences of opinion as to what kind of change and who should institute it and what it's going to look like. So change and chaos should and could bring an awakened consciousness, and has in many, many people through this pandemic experience. And it's beautiful. We hear about some of the negativity in the newspapers and on the internet and in the TV. But the truth be told, there are so many incidences of greatness that are emerging from this experience. And we need to focus on that, because what we focus on will grow, I believe.
Yeah,
and
no,
I have found
that's beautiful, because I think Dr. Ladd, you know, is the world is, I guess the word chaos would be, but everything is constantly changing. So that I think you're right. I think Dr. Ladd would encourage students to what seems to be a negative could also be viewed as an opportunity. And actually, that follows along the teachings of Swami Shivananda, which is, adapt, adjust, accommodate. So, and having the ability to do that even under what we would consider to be dire circumstances really reflects a level of growth and consciousness of the individual. So that's really like, the rubber to the road. It's that, we can really be tested. So I think we're on number 3 of lessons learned at the Ayurvedic Institute. Number 4?
Number 4 is your emotions are your friends. My
Are you sure?
We're not. Yep. If they can lead you to your heart's desires, they can lead you to joy and creativity and the divine in your life. But you're not going to be able to do that. They unless you recognize, accept them, and let them go. Let them. You can. I didn't understand the impact of feeling, of actually feeling my senses. I was ignoring them, and that priceless awareness of our sense organs is a way that we interact with the world. And by interacting with the world, instead of, can I say it, numbing out to what's going on, but actually feeling it, it can move through us instead of getting stuck in us.
Right. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Okay,
and I think that really reflects Ayurveda as a holistic system of healing. That the disease process is not always starting at the physical realm. That if we're not acknowledging our emotions, or we're repressing them or pushing them away, and really not making friends with them or friends with ourselves, those that's a slippery slope in terms of our well-being and how we are able to function in the world. So thank you for that. I think we're on number 5.
I thought of number 5 is the word AMA.
AMA. That's
it's not
okay.
The American. It's not the American Medical Association.
Yeah.
It's AMA is toxic morbid waste. And it could be emotional or physical.
Yes. AMA.
It's about processing. It's about processing what you experience both mentally and physically.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing the other 4, we don't create as much AMA and we stay healthier. AMA gets in the way of our own healing experience. And that's why we need regular panchakarmas or detoxes, if we want to call it that, at the level we're ready for, that supports us.
Sure.
Okay. Sure. That's why letting go is so important. That's why epigenetics and things like Tarpana can support us in our healing journey. And that's how we could accomplish what we came here for. Can we say Dharma? Our journey. It isn't only about our healing, it's about our doing service are doing what we came here for, so we could feel fulfilled, so we could use our creative uses, so we could support others and support ourselves.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. There you really said so much there. I mean, I think the first thing when I think about ama, I think about ama just in a very simplistic way as, toxins building up in the body. But ama is, you know, it could be emotional toxins. The Ayurveda allows us to think that, these toxins, it's not just physical. So, everything and then it's also, we have to be aware that when we're digesting things, whether it's on an emotional level or mental level or physical level, we have to give ourselves time to process, you know. Um, and that there are practices that we can use to really start the healing process and to maintain good health, like Panchakarma, like the Tarpana that you described. But also, I think it's important, and you probably can speak to this working directly with clients, is that sometimes going too fast is not a good idea, you know, especially when you're letting go of, toxic emotions and things that have really built up over the years, that it may be too overwhelming to really be able to process all of that very quickly. So it's really a process, and I think that's important. And where does all this lead? I love where you've brought it full circle about, we're not just healing to feel good, although of course we want to feel good, we want to feel bliss, we want to be joyful in the world, but we I do believe, and I know you said this as well, that we're all here. We all have a responsibility in our lifetime, our dharma. What we're meant to do, and how we're meant to serve. And by really embracing these Ayurvedic practices, we now have the opportunity to do our dharma. So that which is really joyful. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I like the way you brought that into it. It's not just about creating optimum health, although that by itself is wonderful, but then what are we able to bring out into the world? So,
What I think a closing statement might be how Ayurveda came to be. And the Vedic scholars recognized that people when they were sick, they could not serve God. They prayed for direction and knowledge and awareness so that they could be in health, so they could support God and pray to God. If one is sick, their focus is on their sickness. It's not, sometimes it's still on God, but most people are somewhat distracted when they're not well. And they can't fully come to the table.
right, they're not fully present.
They're, because they feel so bad. And they're basically, the Vedic scholars became super scientists in examining everything around them, in examining nature, in examining plants, animals, and seeing the cycles of life and the changes, and made a wonderful, wonderful scientific series of treatments that still today are recognized as valid, as the basis of many or most medical systems today. and there's different opinions as to how much Ayurveda played into the world health systems, but the Ayurvedic response is a very large amount of medicine is derived from Ayurveda, and it's still all of the herbs. I went to herbology school for 3 years, and so many of the Ayurvedic herbs, now we're getting scientific proofs of how strong they are and beautiful they could work in both chronic and acute and in healthy individuals to keep them healthy. My dream is that people could have what Ayurveda is, which is a science of long, healthy life. That's my dream, to be a conduit for that in the people I meet, in a sensitive way, in a way that works for them. And every person is different. Not everybody's ready for a healing journey. A lot of people are frightened of any kind of change. But for the group that's not frightened, that's ready to step up, they know when their moment in time has come. And they know what resonates with them, whether it's me or someone else. But they have a right to have their dreams come true with health, that no one should stop them from going forward. But they have to be their own health manager. No one else can do it for them. They have to step up to the challenge when they're ready. But by waiting, it very often makes it worse. But a person has to do it when it's right for them, when they're ready to commit to themselves. We can commit to so many things, Maureen, but very often committing to ourselves, that's another ball game entirely. We can take care of our family, our relatives, our friends, our work, our whatever, what people ask us to do. But what about when it's coming from our own hearts, that we must do something now? And I encourage everyone to stand up for themselves, stand up for their right to be who they need to be fulfilled, so that when they're older and they're close to transitioning, that they feel they've lived a completed life.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. A fully lived life. And I think before we conclude, I'd like to know, Ayurveda is known as a science of self-healing. But how do you view the role of healer in someone's self-healing journey? How is the healer? How can a healer be instrumental in someone's journey of self-healing?
I think that the healer, first of all, gives hope, holds the space, and gives them options with priority options, but not too much and not too little. Baby Bear was right. This chair is too small. This chair is too big. This chair is just right.
But you don't want to overwhelm them.
The client, I shouldn't say patient, the client is the one who transforms, but they have to allow it. And if there's enough trust, the healer and the right relationship is formed and the right follow-up, occurs where they have the support that they require and they've had enough of the experience to let it go, then they work together. They don't, the goal is for the client to become so self-aware that they could transmute their experiences before they end in having to heal something in early stages versus late stages. Ayurveda works with both, but is most successful with the earlier you get a client, most successful. But it doesn't mean you can't have magnificent healing at every level, but it's more difficult when the seeds, and you remember the stages
Sure,
of
sure.
disease from
Later
Ayurveda
stages. Yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah,
is
that's
much more difficult, but not impossible
sure.
in every case, but in some cases too far gone.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's very good. So, and I think that's really important in the healer and client relationship, that the things that you mentioned, that first of all, I think you want to inspire the client, and that's giving the hope, and also giving them the space to come to their own self realizations, and presenting options, but not too many or too few. Getting a sense for what they can handle, not overwhelming. I think those are all salient points in looking for a healer, and really, I view the healer as a partner in the client's journey. So that's beautiful. Well, I believe that what are you working on today, Liz, with your clients? How has the pandemic changed how you're doing things? Any suggestions from an Ayurvedic perspective? Well, these are actually multiple questions, but how have things shifted for you in the last year or so in working with your clients from an Ayurvedic perspective?
What I've been changing toward, because I'm always incorporating the best of ancient and modern methods that I find. And I've been teaching a lot of stress management using technology with people, along with ancient Ayurvedic methods of breath control. Like one of the best ones is alternate nostril breathing in Ayurveda, as you know. And in 5 minutes, a person could go from an extreme panic attack to being in a calm, settled place. And it's something I used when my thyroid burned out, and it saved me and allowed me to, as a smorgasbord tool, to still live even though I was struggling with things I had to resolve. So stress management is a major part of helping people manage their day-to-day lives in this world we're living in today, because so many people are so stressed out. They don't know what to do. And it affects, so many bodily systems. And some people are at higher risk. Stress increases every negative toxic load that could occur on the body. Anything, there's a Western term, diathesis stress, and in diathesis stress model, we're genetically predisposed, just like Ayurveda says, to certain organs being susceptible to stress. And in this case, in the pandemic, it's the lungs, it's the heart, it's many different, it's the GI tract, okay? It's depression, it's suicide, unfortunately, in some people that don't know how to deal with what they're feeling. And so what I try to do is give people the tools to deal with the stress of their life in a way that works for them. Not too much, not too little.
Sure.
Just
Yeah, that's
the
wonderful.
right-
So the real focus, most recently for you has been, makes a lot of sense, managing stress. And from Ayurvedic perspective,
Another,
from an Ayurvedic perspective,
another,
I'm sorry, just a follow-up question.
oh, go ahead.
You talked about the breath techniques that are used in Ayurveda, and specifically alternate nostril, which is Anuloma Viloma or Nadi Shodhana, and the importance of certain breathing techniques to really really calm the nervous system and to bring balance into the body. Are there any other suggestions that you use regularly with clients in terms of helping them with stress from an Ayurvedic perspective?
Yes. Um, live foods. In Ayurveda, this was not something I understood when I studied with you, Noreen,
Sure.
but we can nourish ourselves with the highest caliber foods.
Yeah, that's really important.
And
That's important. I mean, Ayurveda definitely, we can certainly incorporate living foods if our digestion is strong. Ayurveda also gives us ways to strengthen our digestion so that we assimilate more nutrients. And Ayurveda discourages using leftovers because they lack prana. So just like we're gonna, that we can receive when we're in high prana from the fresh foods, from meditation, from some of these breathing practices, from mantra. Certainly, I think all of this will help with stress.
yes.
So those are really good. Now, Ayurveda, it's the growth's been exponential in the last decade. And where do you see the future of Ayurveda in the U.S.? From where it was a decade ago to where it is now, and where do you see Ayurveda in the next 10 years?
I see it as complementary medicine in America. I don't see it as here's Ayurveda, here's Western medicine. I see that there's a role for both, okay? And that in working together, that you have the best of both worlds. And I think that one of the other things that we could expect to occur as it's becoming more and more acceptable in higher education, in hospitals today, as it's spreading and more people are studying, more programs are available, it's becoming more stringent in terms of the requirements to practice in Ayurveda. So now we're developing all kinds of methodologies for training people who love Ayurveda. We're developing all kinds of research studies, and groups are coming together, and the licensing board has come together, APNA and NAMA, and the different programs. When I went to India the second time, I presented at a national conference that from APNA in India. And I trained at a Panchakarma center and followed doctors there. And so as more training opportunities become available and more methodologies for helping people get up to speed in their teaching, in their training, I really see myself as a teacher. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not an MD. I can't diagnose. I can't treat per se in America, but unless I'm using a different licensure to be able to touch or treat in that way, or a different certification in America. But I think that it's moving in a very positive direction. And as the numbers grow, there'll be a tipping point. Just like Ayurvedic herbs in America are becoming, you can walk into any vitamin store and there's Ayurvedic herbs all around you mixed in all the vitamins now. A decade ago, no way.
Yeah, no,
but they work. They made, and so I think the future is there's going to be more where voices to be heard as more and more stories are told and more research is done, and empirical research, then double blind studies. And people are desperate for methods of healing that are not harmful, that are safe, that are effective. And I see it as efficient, elegant, effortless.
I love
this
that.
method of forward, step by step, in a way that is good for the individual, that is not going to harm them, is only going to support them.
That's beautiful. Well, I love the three E's: efficient, elegant, and effortless. So that's really beautiful. And I think you make a wonderful point that Ayurveda is now complementary to Western medicine, and that will continue to grow in that relationship. And also that, there's been some changes, and there's a move toward more requirements in terms of practitioners and licensing and things like that, and that we'll continue to see how that evolves as well. So well, this has really been a wonderful discussion, Liz. I so appreciate you sharing both your personal Ayurvedic journey and your shift into working with Ayurveda in a professional way with many clients over the years. Do you have anything else you'd like to add for our listeners and viewers on Ayurveda before we close?
I think it all comes down to loving yourself and loving other people and loving your life, and learning to be creative in approaching your personal challenges in a way that works for you. I think that's what it's all about.
That's beautiful. I think if we say what the sum of all those parts are, I would say joy, a joyful life. So I love that.
Yes.
Wonderful. And I want to let our viewers and listeners know where they can find you. Your website is, why don't you let me know, what is I will include all of this in the show notes, but your website, Liz? Leelah?
Leelah Eisenberg.com. And there's also a Facebook group, Leelah Eisenberg.com.
Okay.
Leelah
Beautiful.
Eisenberg.
That's so great. I will include that detail in the
I,
show notes as well. Um,
Noreen, I'd
yes.
like to give thanks.
Oh, yes, yes.
I,
Sorry, I
I,
almost forgot. And I know you wanted to acknowledge and give thanks to at the conclusion of our episode. So I'd certainly like to give you the opportunity to do that.
thank you.
You're welcome.
I am deeply indebted to my husband, to my teachers, to my relatives, friends, clients, and children. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Liz. And Leelah, I so appreciate you taking the time today to share your wisdom and the Ayurvedic way. So